Welcome to Good Grief, the podcast where resilience meets reality. I'm your host, Dr. Christine Malone. In this podcast, we delve deep into the stories of individuals who've triumphed over tragedy, adversity, and trauma. In every episode, we bring you raw and honest narratives from guests who faced life's most challenging moments head on. Through candid conversations, they share their journeys of resilience, shedding light on the strategies, mindset shifts, and support systems that empowered them to rise above their darkest hours. Join us as we explore the profound depths of human resilience and discover how, even in the face of life's toughest trials, there can be light, growth, and yes, good grief. Okay, listeners, thank you so much for joining me for this episode today. I have multiple guests in this episode. I have Narene Stokes Crosby, Sheila Albers, and Susan Berardi. So Narene and Sheila have a common thing together where they both have lost a son due to police violence. So we're going to hear about that. And Susan is the author who has helped them with the book about their situations. So Narene, we'll start with you. You want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Christine, and thank you. I want to first thank you for having me here with you. I'm Narene Stokes Crosby. I'm 65 years old. I've always had a motto of you learn something new every day.
Mm-hmm.
I've taught the kindergarten through third grade. That's experience. I've also worked at the medical field for 29 years. That's
Okay.
another experience.
Yeah.
So I'm retired now, and I'm out on a disability because some of my health issues, but I believe I'll make it. You got to make it. I got to be strong and stay strong for myself first, and then for my grandkids. I have 7 grandkids from 19 to 2 years old. So that's a lot of activity going on in my family.
Yes, it is.
We don't have a dull moment. Let me put it that way.
Thank you. So Sheila, tell us a bit about yourself.
I'm Sheila Albers. I live in a suburb of Kansas City, Overland Park. I've been married for 28 years. I am a mom of 3 boys. John would be 24 now. I have a 19-year-old and I have a 15-year-old. I was a public educator for 25 years. I was a teacher and then an administrator. The last 13 years of my career, I was a middle school principal. It was the best job I've ever had. And then for the last 7 years, I've been doing advocacy work around open records and government transparency and mental health.
Great. Yeah. All great things to be working on. Susan, I know you're the author. If you just want to tell us a bit about yourself, and then I'd kind of like to know how you came to know Narene and Sheila.
Sure. Thank you, Christine, for having us on. We really appreciate the time. And we just think a lot about your podcast and what you're doing for others out there. So I'm an author, and it's been 4 years that over 4 years' time that I've been researching, investigating these 2 women's sons' stories of their police shootings. And so I met them. I actually, I knew Sheila a long time ago when my youngest son and her oldest son, John, were 4 and 5 years old. And we lived in the same neighborhood, actually, in St. Louis, and they played a lot together. And the Albers moved to Kansas City, and we kind of lost touch over time. And it actually wasn't until I saw the news about her son John's police shooting that I reached out, just as someone who cared about the family and cared about her children and who knew John, at least when he was a little boy. And so that's kind of, we kind of got back in touch that way. I was living in St. Louis at the time. And one day I came out to visit and to talk to her about what had happened. And she introduced me to Narene. Narene was a really, really good friend of hers. And I'm sure they'll tell you how they met. But I got to meet Narene and her story of her son Ryan, and that he was shot by police. And the more I talked to each of them, the more their stories not only were disturbing in what happened, but also were eerily similar in how the police treated them and how the script that the police followed, where it wasn't just burying the evidence and covering up, it was their treatment of the mothers and their blaming of the mothers. So it was from blaming the victim to blaming the mother. And when I started to learn more about both of their stories, I couldn't stop. This story had to be told. I also think, the interracial friendship that they developed, regardless of, of everything they went through, the trauma that they went through, the tragedy, the horrible treatment that they received, their friendship continued to get deeper and deeper and deeper. And to me, that was a true social justice triumph, is the friendship that came out of that, and that still exists today. And when I see the two of them together, I can see the genuineness and the authenticity of their relationship that they have together. And I thought that was an amazing story, both for the tragedy, but also for their triumph in each other and in their resilience.
And the thing that they share, of course, that horrible episode that they share, I'm sure only further cement that bond. That's I can only imagine. So I would like to start, before we talk about what happened to your boys, I would like to start to hear about them. So Narene, if you would tell us a bit about Ryan, we'll start with you.
Well, Ryan was my last born. He was my only son. I had two girls before him. So me getting the announcement that I was having a boy, Christine, it was just like, oh, I can't believe it. Because, I'm scared. I'm thinking it's another girl. He's going to be a girl. And the only thing helped me was knowing that the truth that he was a boy. I'm going to say it, y'all. The doctor came and told me that you have some scrotums in your ultrasound. That's just how he said it. So I'm not, at that time, I don't know, I'm 20 something. I'm not knowing what scrotums mean. And then my mother is sitting there with me, and she says, "You're having a boy, because that means he got balls." And I just hit the floor. I was just like, what? So after that, it was like Ryan was the love. Everybody embraced him because he was the last boy in the family to be born. He thought he was the little head of the household. He ran the house because he had two older sisters, and they wanted to treat him like he was a doll. And he said he wasn't having it. Them putting, his shoes on him, they shoes, and just dressing him up. He immediately, 4 years old, he was like, no. So I put him in the sports. I tried him in all the sports. I tried him in baseball, football, basketball, and he was short. Just his stature was short. So I'm like, you'd be better in baseball or soccer or something, but not basketball because you can't shoot. But then he showed us he was determined. He was always a determined boy to show me what he gonna do and can do. He never, gave up in his goals. Yeah. And he grew up as gifted and talented. They tried to say he was a little special at one time, but this lady screened him for me, a counselor screened him, and he got into the gifted and talented. And so he was real smart. He just loved his family. He was just amazing. I had an amazing son, and I knew he stayed out of trouble because I would always be on it. We were the ordinary family, just trying to do our due and live our life and mind our business and leave it as that. Yeah. That's how I brought him up.
Yeah. Yeah. He sounds like a kid.
Yeah.
So, Sheila, would you tell us a bit about John?
Sure. So Steve and I at the time were living in St. Louis, and we were trying to have a family. And for unknown reasons, we could not get pregnant. And so we decided to pursue international adoption. And we brought John home from Minsk, Belarus when he was about 17 months old. Um, he was developmentally on track. He had white, blonde, like platinum, almost blonde hair and ice blue eyes. And I'm biased. I thought he was the most beautiful baby, on the earth. Um, I spent the first part of his 18-month-old life in an orphanage, in, not an ideal situation. But we brought him home, and we were over the moon. Similar to Ryan, he loves sports. He wanted to be outside, baseball, basketball, football, soccer. Soccer ended up being his big love. We moved here to Kansas City in 2006 when he started kindergarten, and I took the principalship of a local middle school. He academically was on track, but did get diagnosed with ADHD when he was in elementary school, and it didn't surprise me. He had a whole lot of energy. Um, um, he did things intensely. He was either all in or all out. And that's why he loved soccer, and he was a goalie. He did not mind flying out of a goalie box to catch a ball if people were even kicking near his face. Like he was fearless. That would be another good way to describe John, was fearless. Late middle school, we started to notice some changes. There was an uptick in dishonesty and a change in a friendship group, and really starting to struggle with who he was. And by the time he hit high school, he was on a very much of an emotional roller coaster, either doing really well, hanging out with the right kids, great grades, or on the opposite end. So we got him into therapy, and it was his junior year of high school that the biggest emotional roller coasters kind of hit, with him having really big ups and really big downs. Gotten into some trouble with law enforcement. He'd made some poor choices. And I think mostly was struggling with who he was, like that he had no ties to anyone in his biological background, and that I think he struggled with, why did my biological mom give me up, and why he wanted some ties to his background, and I did look, and I tried to get him those, and I was unsuccessful.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard that about a lot of adoptions, because international adoptions. So great. Yeah. One of my grandsons has that white hair and blue eyes too. So so you start talking about it, it's like my Dutch. So what you both have in common, among other things I know, is that both of you lost your sons due to police shootings. So if you want to tell us a bit about kind of what was going on, where were they? Why would the police suddenly shoot these boys? I mean, what was the story? So Narene, if you want to go first, that'd be great.
Well, Ryan was 24. They killed him. And that night, he was a 24-year-old single young man going down to have him some fun with his friends at this entertainment center we have here. It's called Power and Light. But the Black people call it Power and White because they treat us different. They really treat us different. So Ryan went down that night, and they just wanted to hang out a little bit, because one of his friends' birthday, and they weren't dressed properly to go into the clubs. They had a dress code, so they knew that, and they were more casual, just hanging out, flirting with the girls, as they tell me, and all this. So there was a white boy that came up to Ryan and his friends and accused Ryan's friend of stealing his cell phone. just out of the blue, just came up. So they had words, and Ryan's friend pushed the white boy, but then Ryan stepped in between them and like a peacemaker to break it up. Let's go. Let's get out of here. Well, the police see this, but they don't say anything to him, like what's going on or whatever. Because they have like fire extinguishers that were pet with what they call it, the spraying, and they start spraying the young people. Like,
Pepper spray.
yeah, instead of getting them, trying to talk and get them out. So when they sprayed them, you either drop because it burns, or you run. I mean, your reaction is to run out of it, get out of there. So Ryan and his friends proceeded to run and get out, but the white boy was still saying his phone, and instead of the police telling them to go right up the street, the police department, 2 blocks maybe, up the street from this place. And instead of them telling him to go make a report or whatever, go up there, they spray him and chase Ryan. And then Ryan gets in the parking lot because his friend has got pepper spray, so his eyes are burning. So he gives the keys to Ryan to tell him that, get him a car. And as Ryan proceeds to the car and the police are running, not saying that, it's just, they just shot him in the back. They shot him in the back. I was like, no questions, no communication, no nothing.
And if I could just add a bit to that. When Ryan and his friend Ollie were walking, were headed home. They were heading to the parking lot. So and kind of being and they weren't in the clubs. The young man who was 21 who came up to them was completely drunk. And there were many witnesses, and even his friends said he was, quote, hammered. And he came up to the 2 of them. He accused Ollie of stealing his phone, which Ollie had not. He later admitted after all this that he probably dropped it on the sidewalk. But at the time, after the pepper spray hit, lots of people ran. There were probably 50 people that ran from the pepper spray because it hurts, and they want to get away from it. This gentleman at 21, his name was Jordan, went up to the police officer with his, there were 5 other people with him, and pointed in the direction that Ryan and a bunch of other people were running. And he said, "They stole my phone." And he's pointing toward Ryan. Ollie, the one that he had originally, Ryan's friend that he had originally accused, what he was hunched over there, just right across the street, because his eyes were burning. So the one that he had originally accused, he didn't even point to him. He was pointing to a bunch of people that were going in Ryan's direction. And so the police, on the word of a drunk 21-year-old man, started chasing after Ryan. Ryan was 30 seconds ahead of them. He didn't know they were chasing him. He's running to the parking lot to get Ollie's car, and he said, I'm going to go back and pick you up. I'll pick up the car. I'll circle around and get you. So that was the plan. On his way, he gets in the parking lot, and on his way to the car, another cop who met him kind of in the parking lot. He wasn't in the chase, but he was kind of at the end of the chase. All these policemen are following him. He doesn't know they're behind him. There's another cop that's in the parking lot. No warning, no words, nothing. Shoots him in the back. He shoots 3 times, and 2 of them hit him, and he's down.
Crazy. Just crazy.
Wow. I mean, over a reported cell phone.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, over a reported cell phone. Yeah, that's absolutely insane. We'll talk a bit about kind of the aftermath and I know that there's this police cover up and so on, but Sheila, why don't you tell us a bit about kind of too?
Uh, so John was killed 5 years later after Ryan was killed. And it was January 20th of 2018. Um, Ryan was killed in July of 2013. John had taken a class to get recertified to be a soccer ref, and he'd been a soccer ref since he was in 7th grade. And he loved it. He was good at it. He liked that he made $25 a game. And the class to get recertified was at a sporting goods store. And John at that day decided to shoplift. And now he didn't need it. He didn't lack for anything, but he um, got caught stealing a bunch of clothing from the sporting goods store when he was on a break from the class. So my husband had to go pick him up. He was in police custody. Needless to say, my husband and I were furious with him. It was a stupid, poor choice. And so he knew he was going to be grounded and not have access to his car that evening. And but we were scheduled to go out to dinner or grill out really with extended family at a home not far from us. And we told him he could go with us, and he wouldn't be grounded from a family event, but he didn't want to go. He was in a super bad mood, and I think pretty angry at himself for making a poor choice. So we left, my husband and I and our other 2 kids. It was about 5:15. And when we got to our extended family's home, my phone was in my purse. And about 15 minutes, while we were within 15 minutes of being there, 20 minutes after being there, I pulled my phone out and there were a string of like texts in my phone. I could tell something was really wrong. And I returned one of the phone calls. We jumped in our car. I looked at Steve and I'm like, something's really wrong. So we jumped in the car, got home, and we pulled onto a street that's kind of perpendicular to ours. And I got out of the car and I bolted to my home. And I didn't get to my house. I was stopped by a police officer. And at this point, there were loads of lights, sirens, tape was going up. And I asked the officer, I'm like, is my son okay? And the officer said, no, he's passed. And I did not know what to think. And I dropped to the ground and we ended up sitting in a car on our neighbor's driveway waiting for information, not knowing what had occurred. And what had occurred was John got on Snapchat, social media, and made some suicidal type thought comments like, I'm done, I'm going to end my life, it's over. He had a bottle of alcohol in front of him and an empty pill bottle. Um, and it turns out that he had no illegal substances in his system, but he was definitely painting the picture to people that he was in mental distress, no doubt. So his friends called 911, and 911 responded, 2 cop cars, 1 officer. They chatted on my front lawn for a minute, and then neither went to the door to knock or make contact with John. One officer ran to his car to get a cell phone, thinking he would try to get a hold of me, and the other one, for some odd reason, took a defensive position behind a tree in my yard. And John got my minivan keys and attempted to leave the house. The officer comes across our front lawn. He unholsters his weapon. He watches the garage door slowly open while he's got his gun unholstered. He sees the tail brake lights on the minivan, and the minivan begins to exit. And the officer's name was Clayton Jennison. He yells, stop the car, but he does not identify himself as a police officer. He is standing alongside the vehicle, and he fires the first 2 of what will be 13 rounds. And the first 2 shots go through, and he's standing alongside the van. The van rolls out, turns around, and then it rolls backwards back up onto the street and then eventually back onto a neighbor's home across the street. But the officer fires 11 more rounds, a total of 13. At no point was the officer behind the vehicle when he fired the shots. And John, 6 of those bullets hit John, and he was killed almost instantaneously. The media release that next day from the police department and then also from the district attorney's office 30 days later state that John rapidly and aggressively pulled out of the garage. They talked about potential drugs and alcohol, and they basically painted the picture that you've got an at-risk teen using drugs and alcohol trying to run over a police officer. And so the unthinkable that day occurred.
Yeah. Wow. Both of you, my heart goes out to you. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Horrific stories.
And Sheila's is on video. That's what helps. Ryan.
We have video.
So with video, no charges against the police officer at all?
No.
Okay. So let's move to, again, the reaction, the police and the media reaction afterwards. I mean, what possible, other than I'm assuming you're going to tell me they lied, they falsified things to
right.
sound like the boys were wrong. I mean, how did that all pan out?
Well, Christine, when they came to my home to inform me, or should I, let me back up a little. They called me first and asked me if I could meet them somewhere to tell me the welfare of Ryan. And I'm like, meet you? I'm not going to meet you. You can come to my home, because the family and friends are already at my home waiting. We've been waiting. Ryan was killed in the wee hours of the morning, and they didn't come to my home till 8 o'clock that night to inform me of them killing Ryan.
Can I just interject, Narene? I'm sorry. I just want to make sure.
Go ahead.
So it was probably 3 a.m. when one of Ryan's friends came banging on Narene's door.
Yeah, thank
you. You want to talk about that, and that you went down to the scene and how they treated you when you got to the scene.
Yeah. So my informing was when Ryan's friend Lover, his name is Labero, but we call him Lover, and he was knocking on the door. He was knocking on my door like or not. And it's 3 o'clock in the morning. So I opened the door and he's screaming and asking me, is Ryan home? Where's, they called him, his nickname is Fatback, because he was so thick. And I'm like, he's out. I knew he was out, gone, but he had made it back home. Because I never really said bye to him. I always say, hey, I'll see you later, or come on back now. Come on, like the Beverly Hills Bill, which is come on back home now. So when Lover came to the house, and me and his sisters, we were all asleep, so we got startled about him, asking, where's Ryan? And then he's on the cell phone with his sister, well, she's down at this entertainment center, and she was the one who called Lover and told him that something bad has happened to Ryan. We're down here. The police won't let us, get over close enough to see, but she believed they've hurt Ryan. She didn't say they had killed him or anything. She just said that he was shot. So I tell Lover, I got to go down there. I'm asking him where's the block, or what do I go to? And he was telling me what street it was on. Because I don't, I don't like to go down with the young people. I know I don't go to those areas. So get down there, and we're at this bus stop, what I can remember, me and my daughter, and we're asking the police, who's over there? What's going on? I can't see. My eyes are so full of tears. And so my daughter's looking and she's screaming, tell me that's not my brother. Tell me that's not my brother over there. Because she could see on the ground. And so we asked the officer, we was like, what's going on? And did somebody get shot? My daughter says, and he says immediately, what are you talking about? Who is it? Who do you, how you know, or what, who told you? And so I'm like, we know that we got a call that something happened to my son. So, and he was down here, so I'm trying to figure it out. He immediately tells me, just sit down, wait a minute. The detective will be here to talk to you. And then the detective does come and start questioning me like, what he looked like, what he got on, and who he's also saying, how do you know? And I'm like, can I just go see if that's my son? They tell me, no, you go home until someone will contact you, someone will call you or watch the news.
And if I could just add here, when she said the detective came, it was probably an hour and a half of waiting before he came to talk.
Yeah, down at the bus stop. So, they were just treating me so just no empathy, no nothing. It was just like we done killed him and nothing you can do about it, nothing you can say about it. This is what you gotta settle with. So and I said no. Once I got out of my shop, once everything, I was like, this was my baby boy. This was the only son I had. I need to know why did y'all do him like that? What happened here? Because when they came to my house, when they did finally come to give me notification, Christine, that they had killed him, here comes the second false narrative, the lie. They come to my home finally to tell me the welfare of Ryan. And they say there was a standoff. Ryan had a gun. He wouldn't put it down. So we had to shoot him 5 times in the chest. The whole family, the whole friends, everybody that was there was like, no, screaming, no, Ryan, that's not Ryan. Ryan wouldn't do that. I knew that he didn't even carry a gun. So, I was like, I can't believe this. I can't believe what just happened here. And they made me wait. What was it? 3 or 4 days, I said, before I got to see him, before I got to actually view his body.
They showed up to Narene's house, an entire, they had enough cruisers that was the length of her whole block. And they drove around the block slowly, all of these cop cars. And an armored van, and a SWAT team comes out of the van, armored, all geared up with machine guns and the whole thing, surrounded her house. Yep. This was her notification. And then they came up and told the story that she said. But I mean, before that even happened, her niece tried to call the police at around 7 a.m. and tried to call the police station. She was calling all the hospitals, tried to call the police station. The person that answered the phone at the police station, and she started asking about Ryan, the police officer that answered said, you could just watch it on the news, and hang up on her.
Yeah. I can't even, I have nothing to say about that. That's blowing my mind. I can't even imagine that. Look at it on the news. I mean,
then Narene, you were going to say that when you finally got to see him, it was at his wake. It was for his funeral.
But the day before.
Well, and what did you see?
The funeral director calls the family and asks us to come to, view him. And that's when we were told he was shot. The director says, I don't know what they saying or why they told you what they did. But he wasn't shot in the chest, he was shot in the back. So to believe it, he said, let me get the men of the family to come first and view Ryan. And Christine, when they came out and you see men crying and his uncles and his dad and all of them crying, and they used some very vulgar words of saying they shot Ryan in the back. All of us, me, my sister, and his sisters, to hear them, like I said, to see them and hear them say it, and it's true. What they saw, it had to be true. I just lost it as a mother. I was just hurt, angry, not understanding why they uh told me that. I just don't get it. I still don't get it to this day.
Yeah.
Why lie?
I mean,
Yeah.
exactly. It's not like, especially with today's forensic,
Yeah.
what angle people were at and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that I just I'm flabbergasted that they would.
Yeah, it's mind blowing.
First of all, in Sheila's situation, that a policeman's behind the car when there was proof there's no policeman behind the car, and then with Narene, where he's at a standoff with a gun over a alleged cell phone.
Right.
I'm just stunned about that. So obviously the police have denied these things. They're saying no, the boys brought it on themselves by the shootout, whatever narrative they have. But tell me about the concept of the secondary victimization. So police are somehow does that mean they're coming to say that the family is somehow responsible for this, or what was that all about?
Well, I secretly find out that they tried to hold a secret on me. They gave the police officers awards for killing Ryan. Immediately, I told my lawyers, I don't get that. How would they give awards to the officers for killing Ryan? So we fought that, and they rescinded the awards. They took them back, but still no apology, no anything. Then it goes to a grand jury, and the grand jury calls it justifiable. Now, that's the dirt right there. It started with a whole lot of dirty cop issues to me, because you try to get awards for it, then you don't, come to us and no apology, no let me know anything they're doing. Everything is under the rug. So I go to take a title of, I'm not letting my son's death be swept under the rug. I'm going to find out what's going on here. And I'm still finding that, because I still, like I said, don't understand. Out of 12 years, it'll be 12 years in July, how you kill Ryan. So I make a statement of, this is 2025, but they're trying to treat me like we're living in 1968 or somewhere in history. And I feel like I'm with Emmett Till's mother of, my son. I've been to Alabama to speak in Birmingham, Alabama at the National Lawyers Guild. They invited me, and I went, and they liked my statement I made of don't sweep his death under the rug. Be change the narrative and give Ryan his good character, because he was a good young man, no record, no drug. When they did autopsy, they didn't find anything to try to put dirt on. And I knew that when they kill someone, the police kill someone, they run you through. They run that record. They run that family. They run your address to see how many times you've maybe been called, for disturbance. So they didn't have anything on us, but they want to put everything like give false narratives. And then like today, everybody, Ryan was a good guy. It's like,
yeah, the whole.
I'm sorry. I would add to that, and Sheila's I know she'll talk about her aftermath. But you had mentioned the term secondary victimization, and I
Right.
write about that in the book as well, because with both mothers, they experienced this, and the Department of Justice actually coined that term, secondary victimization, which I thought was very interesting that that's where it came from. But what in this case, the secondary victimization is the mothers, and the articles that came out and the police statements and the DA statements were as much blaming the mothers as they were blaming the sons, right? So first it's basically the sons put themselves in that situation. Either in Ryan's case, they were saying at one point in time he was stealing cars. And that came out in the newspaper. And I actually analyzed the journalism, which came from the police statements that they were being fed. And it just was like Narene had to have been a bad mother. Otherwise this would never have happened. And the same with Sheila. And I know she'll tell you about her story. But the secondary victimization is what the police thrive on. And I'm not here to say that all policemen are bad. And in fact, the book is not a national indictment of police at all. It's these two stories. We're talking about these two police departments at that time with these two shootings, and the mothers drive the story. But that being said, this idea, it secondary victimization is something when someone just says, "How many children do you have?" That can, Narene and Sheila, it's hard for them. It's so hard for them to even answer that question. And the other part of that is people can be sympathetic for a while, but after a while they get tired of it and they want you to move on. And if the mothers don't move on, if they're still sad, if they're still grieving, I know with Narene, she struggled at work with that, going back to work. It was kind of like, can we just talk about magazines and gardening and things like that? And so their grief physically can last decades. And there's all kinds of studies that show how it affects their brain, how it affects their heart, their nervous system. And Sheila can also, I'll hand it over to you, Sheila. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but it can affect their physical condition for decades afterwards, because, anytime if there's a flippant remark given by a DA, that starts their trauma all over again.
So Narene and I have so many things in common, but the way we were both treated after we lost our sons is eerily similar, as Susan said. And that night we waited for information that we didn't get. We didn't even realize that it was an officer involved shooting until my husband, as we're sitting on the driveway of our neighbor's home, my husband kept saying, can we see our son? Can we see our son? And finally, an officer said, well, we're waiting for the OSIT team. And my husband's like, what's an OSIT team? And it's called the Officer Involved Shooting Investigation Team. And I live in Johnson County, which is a very affluent suburb of Kansas City. And instead of a municipality investigating itself when there is a use of force, the surrounding municipalities are supposed to be conducting the investigation, which is supposed to make it impartial and independent. That is not true, but that's how they paint it to the public. And my husband said, what is the OSIT team and why do I even care? And they said, well, it's protocol in an officer-involved shooting. And that is the first indicator we got that it was a police officer that had discharged his weapon. And, we worry, we were worried about a lot of things running through our heads, but we had to leave the area because they would not allow us back in our home because it was considered a crime scene. So we went to our sister-in-law's home, and friends and family joined us there. And I a good friend of mine that evening said, Sheila, you're going to need an attorney. And am I going to like, what kind of an attorney? What do I need an attorney for? And so we made contact with someone. And then the next day, 2 officers from this OSIT team came to my sister-in-law's home to what we initially thought was they were there to answer questions and give us information, like what happened, why would someone shoot at John, what would, and it's the opposite. They're there to ask you questions because they're there to interrogate you to find out, was John doing drugs? Did he drink alcohol? Was he violent? Did he have mental health problems? And we quickly realized we're like, this is not the conversation we thought we were going to have. And they asked even to separate us. And my husband's like, no. And then my husband said, we asked, who's the officer that shot John? Well, we can't tell you that. How many times did they shoot at him? We can't tell you that. So when we said we had been in communication with an attorney, the conversation ended and they shook our hands and they walked out the door. And John was killed on a Saturday. So it was on Sunday that kind of interrogation occurred. And then Sunday evening, we were allowed back in our home. And Monday we met with our attorney and he said, we will wait until the district attorney makes a decision on whether the officer will be charged or not. So we waited 30 days for OSIT to do their investigation. It turns out that OSIT did their investigation in 6 days, which is logistically impossible for any homicide to be investigated thoroughly in 6 days. They don't even get the information back from a crime lab or the full autopsy results in 6 days. But we got a call on February 19th, 30 days later, that we would meet with the district attorney in his office and he would tell us his decision. So our attorney went with us. And right before we walked into that meeting, our attorney turned to us and said, same moderator, Mike said, Stephen, I want you to know that the district attorney is not going to charge this officer. He never has, he never will. And I don't want you going into this meeting thinking that you're going to see some sort of justice because it's not going to happen. And I remember being so angry, like, it went down exactly the way he said it would. So the district attorney was at one end of the table. Our attorney took the other, Steve and I, and then 2 officers from that OSA team were across from us. And Steve Howe looked at us and he started the conversation. Steve Howe is our Johnson County district attorney. He said, well, I know nobody really wants to be here right now. That's the way he started the conversation. And he then told us that the shooting was justified, that the officer had reason to fear for his life. And then he told us he had dash cam footage from the scene and he was going to release it that same day. Well, we didn't know he had dash cam footage and we weren't allowed to see it in advance. And he said, I will show you what I'm going to release right now if you want to see it. And the whole thing was like, being ambushed, like we were blindsided. And I remember saying, I'm not going to sit and watch my son die on video in this room full of people I do not know. I'm not going to do that. So my husband and I excused ourselves from the meeting and our attorney stayed in and watched it. And what Steve Howe did that day this was like 9:00 in the morning. He already had the press conference set up for 10:30 that morning. The media were already ready to be there. He released 2 redacted dash cams. There were a total of 4. There was also neighbor's Ring doorbell cam from across the street. And we had that. Our neighbor gave it to us. Our neighbors were fantastic. And then neighbors also gave it to the police, which is fine. They needed it as part of evidence. But that the day that Steve Howe did the press conference and did the release, he only released portions of the dash cam and none of the Ring doorbell cam. So the narrative went out from the district attorney's office that the officer was standing directly behind the vehicle as he fired his weapon. So it was like a stand your ground self-defense situation. Our attorney, thank God, hired a good forensic expert, used the evidence that we did have available to us, and we filed the lawsuit in April. And we got lucky in our lawsuit. Well, we had a very talented attorney, and then we got lucky with a good federal judge, and the city tried to get the case dismissed. The judge denied their request. And so we settled with the city of Overland Park in late 2018, early 2019. So our legal issues were finished within a year, which is really pretty rare. It didn't drag out forever. But it was years later, after the litigation was over with, we made a very conscious decision not to sign a non-disclosure agreement. They tried to get us to do that, and I said, I absolutely will not do that. And I started doing open records requests. And it was a friend of our family who was a retired attorney who had done a ton of them. He taught me how to do them, and I started doing my own. And over the next few years, we uncovered information that we were not aware of at the time of John's death. That the officer was paid $70,000 to resign from the police department. He was given a severance agreement that would protect his peace officer license at the state level. That Steve Howe made his decisions to not charge before all the evidence was back in and in his possession. And the actual investigative report that was created failed to have certain things you would typically see in it, like a scene diagram, a trajectory report, things you would see in a typical forensic investigation. And those things were all missing. And so, it's and every new piece of information we uncovered, and I did this in collaboration with local media, other friends who are attorneys. I didn't do this by myself. It was layers of trauma on top of layers of trauma, and Narene and I say this a lot, that they took our sons' lives. And then they took their names, and they won't. Well, my outcome's been a little bit better, but they, it's like death by 1,000 cuts, because every single time you discover something that they did that was inappropriate, you relive it all over again. And so when we discovered the severance payment that was given to the police officer to resign, it triggered a Department of Justice civil rights investigation of my son's death. It took 2 years. At the end of that investigation, they did not indict the officer. It's much more difficult to charge at the federal level, when the charge probably should have come at the state level. The legal bar is much higher. And so, but I did get, and this did give us closure. The Department of Justice wrote a rare 2-page statement about John's death, and they corrected the narrative. So that gave us some peace, because what they wrote did not match what the district attorney wrote. And so we got some closure, and we got the narrative corrected. And that's in Narene's case, the narrative got corrected in a report that outgoing
prosecutor turned.
Yeah, the outgoing Jackson County prosecutor wrote a report about officer-involved shootings in Missouri, and laid out very accurate facts about Ryan's case. But that report literally went out in December of 2024. And the Kansas City Police Department has never corrected the narrative, ever. They have never said Ryan was not a criminal. He had not stolen a cell phone. He did not, not steal any cars. And that adds to the whole grieving process, because you're not even allowed to present accurate information about the person that has lost their life.
Right.
Yeah.
And I will say with that
Mhm.
that's where the narratives in the two women's stories diverge, because Sheila and you know, race, we all believe this, and Sheila does too, I know. Race is a part of this. You know, Sheila had her um she got lucky. She had a judge that was sympathetic and could see very easily. I mean, the video helped, made a huge difference. But she was at district court, and the judge said, basically, he said, no, this is going to go to trial. I am not dismissing the case. In Narene's case, this is 3 years later after after Ryan's shooting. 3 years later, she goes to the district court. It's in a different circuit. First,
well, they're both federal. They were both federal.
Federal, yes, yeah. But her district judge says the same thing that Sheila's judge said. We're going to trial. You know, it's not dismissed. The police department appeals it. The Court of Appeals sends it back. District court says, no, you didn't do this right. Do it again. This time that she goes back to the district judge, he changes his mind completely. And now he's dismissed the case based on qualified immunity. So Narene appeals the case to the Court of Appeals, same Court of Appeals that sent it back last time. And this time they uphold the verdict, the second verdict, and say, nope, the case is dismissed. She appeals to the Supreme Court. It's our last chance, right? Supreme Court sends a one-sentence response that they will not even hear it. They will not hear the case. However, the shining moment is Justice Sonia Sotomayor. She writes a dissenting opinion for the ages. And at the very least, Ryan Stokes' name is in the Supreme Court record, if only with a dissenting opinion.
I just made one judge, just one judge.
Yeah.
Still.
And that just shows you the power of a DA, in Sheila's case, the power of a DA and the power of these judges. And it's very arbitrary. You know, one judge, he was willing to risk his reputation. If you read the two orders that the district judge wrote, they contradict each other in so many different ways. And when I read the two, I was like, how would a judge even be willing to? I mean, it's so obvious that he's contradicting himself. But that's what happened. This is now 12 years later. And yeah, she didn't get any remuneration. The judges wouldn't even hear it. She never got to trial. Sheila didn't get to trial because they didn't want to go to trial, and they at least settled, which they don't admit guilt with that. And then she found out all this evidence of the cover-up afterwards, which was horrible. And Narene's gotten nothing.
So you've worked together, Susan, with you authoring it to tell the story in the book. It's called Mothers in Arms. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
When is that released? Is it coming out soon? Or?
Well, we don't have a date yet for the publisher, but what we are hoping to do is gather support for the book, for people that want to read it. So many times with books like these that are controversial, it's hard to get these kinds of books published, especially in today's environment and what's going on. And so what Narene and Sheila and I are trying to do is to gain support from Mothers in Arms. Do your readers, do your listeners want to read this book?
Right.
Do people that are in your networks and their networks, do they want to read this book? Do they think that this is an important book? And the more support we get for it, then the easier it's going to be to have a publishing date that's sooner rather than a lot later.
Great. So other than the book, what other sort of social justice things are you ladies working on to honor your sons? Because I'm sure there's more out there.
Well, my title is Speaking the Truth. Speaking the truth to injustice. So I get invited for here in the community to tell about Ryan, speak about Ryan and his character and how he was going to be have his own dry cleaners. He was willing to be a business entrepreneur. He wanted to, stretch out because his dad had his own dry cleaners. So he wanted to make it a family line of cleaning. And then she had a little girl. Well, she was 18 months when Ryan was killed. She's now 13. So, we speak on her of how it hurts that she has to look at social media or the family shows her pictures or we talk about her dad that she'll never know. But she tells us she feels him. She has had dreams and I had to believe her that maybe he is, there with looking over,
Yep.
So I go out, and like I said, I just came from Birmingham, Alabama in November, speaking, and then I've been invited to Jacksonville, Mississippi, to go down to one of their conferences. The Emmett Till family has invited me. Those attorneys and stuff that work with that, because they made a movie. It was hard to watch, but they made a movie. So
yeah,
I'm just out, and then me and Sheila, like we connect a lot, so talking and trying to reach out to people and letting them know we're here. Because I took Sheila in my arms. She's my baby, she's my Sheila, because I saw her hurt. I felt her hurt. I just, knew that me and her could connect in some kind of way. I could help her because I know what she was feeling. John got killed, and she was the only white woman, Christine.
Yeah.
No, me, I believe we bleed and breathe all the same. I'm not racist. I'm not, prejudiced to that factor. We have white people in our family, so like it's just there. So when Sheila came in, she was the only white lady there that was in that grief moment with all the other mothers. It was like 7 of us, I believe. So when I met Sheila, I told Sheila, I'm the mother of all the mothers. And I think that hit her right there. That statement right there, she said. She didn't want to be with nobody else with me. But she had her pick. She could have been with the other mothers, but she chose to be with me because she said I had been in the longest and she could believe what I felt and tell her how I tried to take her, keep her stable because I'm more the laid back, quiet one. She's more the boasty, go off. She'll go off on you. So I have to watch her. I have to grab her hand. I have to grab her hand.
And Sheila, I know your activism also includes stuff about mental health, right?
It does. So Narene and I met through a social justice organization who More Squared. They're with the Gamaliel Network, and they're the director of More Squared back in 2019 to 2020 reached out to me and said, would you like to meet other mothers who've lost their children to police violence? And I said, absolutely. And so that was right around COVID shutdown. So they invited Narene and I onto a Zoom call. And I remember I was trying to place all the mothers and their sons' cases. And I had vague recollections of Ryan's case, but not like in-depth knowledge. And I was drawn to her immediately because she had been fighting the longest. Because I thought, how long do you have to do this? And she had already been 7 years in. And then Narene's so like, she's quiet but steadfast, like, and she does the work, but she does it in such a way that um she does it with class and with professionalism. And I thought, well, if she can do this work and and not lose it in front of people or in public, because that's what they want you to do, um, then then if Narene can do it, I can do it too. And so she was inspiring to me. And so um I think we were meant to meet, and then we've kept the friendship going since then. And um so my some of my social justice work is about getting additional training for first responders on how to handle someone in a mental health crisis. I'm a big fan of what they call crisis intervention team training, CIT training for first responders, and we've gotten more officers CIT trained in Overland Park. And then we have also in Overland Park, we have an OPCAT unit now. So we have a behavioral mental health unit with more social workers and CIT trained officers than any other municipality in the state of Kansas. Um, and we also opened our first youth crisis stabilization center in Johnson County. It opened last year. And so that my relationship with where I live, Overland Park, is what it's my hometown. I mean, this is where I've chosen to live and raise my children. They have really done a 180 when it comes to mental health and how we handle people in a mental health crisis.
Wow.
And then my other passion is open records and transparency. Because ultimately what Narene and I are trying to do is to prevent these tragedies from happening. We do not want to see anybody else lose their life. And that includes law enforcement. Law enforcement will say frequently, I want to go home to my family. Absolutely. But we want our loved ones to come home to our family. They're both important. And then if that tragedy does occur, though, um, then they need to be handled much differently than Ryan and John's cases were handled. So, and that level of systematic change takes a lot of time and effort. Like it's slow. It's slow. Like it took me 5 years to get the district attorney to put the OSIT manual on his website.
Mm.
Like that seems to me like low-hanging fruit. Like that's something you could do pretty darn easily. 5 years to put the manual online. So it's none of this work is for the faint of heart. Like Narene and I are not sprinters. We're marathoners.
Yeah.
And we're in it for the long haul.
Yeah.
And that's really and we're in it very locally. I think that's, all the work we have been doing really is in Jackson County, Missouri, or Johnson County, Kansas. Yeah.
And I will add that if people took one thing from Narene's and Sheila's stories and their shared journey, is the one thing that people need to know: who is your district attorney or prosecuting attorney, and who is your sheriff? Because those are two pieces of this whole criminal justice, injustice system that we can change very easily with just our vote. And a lot of people don't vote locally, they vote, nationally. But in both of these cases, especially in Sheila's case, the DA made all the difference. And then the sheriff is also important, especially in the rural communities, because that's how they operate, is with the sheriff. So who is your DA or prosecuting attorney? Who is your sheriff? Because they have outsized power in this. And if people wanted to learn more about it, there are two things I would point them to, if this is okay, Christine. One is there was an Emmy-winning news story that was published, and it's called I just want to pull it up. It's called Two Mothers Seek Reform After Police Killed Their Sons. And it's on NBC 41, Kansas City. But if you just look up that title, Two Mothers Seek Reform After Police Killed Their Sons, the reporter interviewed both Sheila and Narene and talks about what happened and also their friendship with each other. It's a wonderful, wonderful news segment, and it did go on to win a regional Emmy for news. And then the other thing I would point them to is an article that was in The Guardian. Just a little self-promotion, I guess, that I did write the article, but what's important, that's not what's important. What's important is that over 80,000 people read it, and it's in The Guardian. It's called Police Killed Their Sons. Their Unmovable Friendship Uncovered a System of Lies. Both of these media...
We'll link to both of those in your podcast notes, so I want to make sure people can find them without having to do a lot of research.
Oh, good. Yeah. So if people wanted to learn more about the story or about Narene and Sheila's journey, I think those are two really good places where they can go. And I also think they're important precursors for the book, because that's kind of where it all sprung from, was that article and that newscast.
Yeah. Because what bothers me is the prosecutor attorney just retired out this past December 2024. She waits till she gets ready to retire to tell how she believes they treated me wrong. They did it wrong. Instead of when I met with, I had a meeting with her, I don't know, some years after Ryan was killed, and they refused to reverse the decision then. But then I guess her conscience has gotten her, and she give a write-up of how they did. It was wrong what they did.
Yeah. Wow. Well, ladies, I want to thank you so much for your time today, for sharing your stories. It has been heartbreaking for me. I'm glad I had my tissues handy, and I really appreciate it. And like I said, we will put links to the Guardian story and the what was the other thing or the show too as well, to make sure that people can find those should they want to read more about you, which I think would be fascinating. So thank you again. I hope you all have a wonderful day, but thank you so much for your time.
Thank you
so much for having us.
All right.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Good Grief. We hope that the stories shared today have inspired and empowered you on your own journey of resilience. If you want to dive deeper into the themes of trauma, tragedy, and survival, be sure to check out my memoir, The Day I Became the Spider Killer, a memoir of trauma, tragedy, and survival. In this book, I shared my own raw and honest experiences, offering insights and strategies for overcoming life's toughest challenges. You can purchase the book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or listen to it on Audible. Your support helps us continue to bring these powerful stories to light and spread a message of hope and resilience. Stay tuned for more incredible stories on our next episode. Until then, remember, even in the face of life's toughest trials, there can be light, growth, and good grief.